Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Mike Ames Recruitment Show, our penultimate episode of 2022. And as you can see, we're going to be talking about how you can build and monetize a business network. Now, we have our resident network coach, Pete, here with us today. But first, Mike, why don't you explain to us why we're talking about this today?
Okay, it's funny really because we've covered quite a few subjects recently that have been very popular. A lot of people have come to them, and yet, this one, which is less popular, there's only 60 odd people signed up for it. This one is less popular, and yet it should be the most popular because real networking builds empires. Let me tell you a little story, true story, and then we'll bring in Pete. When I started off in recruitment, my job for the first 3 months was cold calling because that's what we did and ringing around. I didn't know anybody or anything, and I'm just ringing around. The guy that worked for me, been in recruitment 10 or 12 years, I think, he sat opposite and he would be sitting there and the phone would ring and he would sort of pick it up. Yes, well, okay, yeah, we could help you with that. Yeah, okay, well, I'll come across and see you and I'm sure we'll sort that out. And it's like, where did that come from? Oh, it's some bloke I used to work for 2 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever. Well, you get contractors ringing in saying, I've been referred to you by so-and-so and so-and-so. You're the best person to speak to. And it occurred to me that I'm working really, really hard and getting a fraction of the work that he's got coming in. And the reason for that is he's got a big network. He had a network that did the work for him. These people, they like him and they trust him and they get on with him. And he's built that network on purpose. And that's pretty much what he said to me. And I spent the next, I don't know how long. Well, I'm still doing it. So 34 years building a network. And I just wanted to show you before we bring in Pete exactly what a real network can do, right? That's what a real network can do. We didn't spend any money on marketing. We had people that built and monetized networks and a turnover from 8 million, I think that was, to 30 million in 5 years came from real networks. And that's why I really want people to take note of this show and to really buy into this concept of real networking. And that's why we invited Pete on, because he's our, as you said, real networking expert. He runs our Network 101 product, which is aimed not at recruiters, actually, as it turns out, because they're a bit transactional, but for professional services people who will invest the time and effort to learn how to build networks, and he does that. So welcome to the show, Pete.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited to talk about real networking. A lot of what we cover in the program as well.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, Ped. So to begin with, can I ask the sort of simple question is that we talk about real networking. Can you explain to me what real networking is?
Yes, I can. Let's start not with the noun, but the verb. So the verb, but the noun. So a real network is a group of people who are willing and able to help you in your personal and your professional life. Emphasis the professional, right? So these are people who know you, trust you, believe in the kind of service you deliver, want to reach out and help you when the opportunity presents itself. Either send your work your way, or they refer you in, or they give you insights, whatever it may be. They're really on your side.
Before we get to networking, right? Because I know you want to do that.
Yes.
That there are all sorts of different people, and we're going to dig into this fairly soon. So they're not just people you can do business with, are they? I mean, they're all sorts of people.
No. I will talk about that in a second, in fact, if that's okay, because I want to just nail that networking piece, because once you've got that, then it makes sense about what it is you're trying to achieve, and you can start to see who you're doing it with, really. Because networking is the art of building and maintaining that network. And quite often what people confuse networking with is the very, very beginning of that process, where they go to a networking event, somebody hands them a glass of mediocre wine, and then they mill around a little bit, along with all the other people who are there, hoping that there'll be some decision makers, of which there's like 4 who spend the rest of the night batting away all of these approaches. That's what a lot of people think real networking is. And for some, I mean, there is that, like I said, it's one way you can go and meet new people. You can bring people into the world, and it has a better use further down the line, which we cover in the course. But in the context of what we're talking about is you need to find these people, sure, but then there's this really long period of forming a relationship which builds trust.
Can I just
And
dive in on
that's
that?
the thing that takes time. Yeah.
This concept of an event where you go, lucky dipping is the term that we use, because that's pretty much what it is. And we're not against events, by the way. If you go there and you meet the kind of people that you need to meet and you make money from it, we'll carry on doing it. But if you're looking for higher level decision makers, the chances of them going there are pretty slim, aren't they? And the chances of them going there and buying from anybody is even slimmer, even if you can get to speak to them when you're there. However, it is something that has become the verb to network. And that's the problem, isn't it? Well, I go networking. Well, now what you do is you go to an event and meet or don't meet people. Whereas networking is something else completely different. And I think, to me, the first change is a change in mentality, is to think about the network as a noun, first and foremost. It's a group of people. That's what you're doing. You're meeting them, building relationships with them, and getting them so they'll help you. And then networking is building that, which may or may not be going to events. I don't go myself, never hurt me, but some people do, and that's fine.
We do know people who make a lot of money off them, but once you move your perspective towards this building of the network, you suddenly realize that it's lots of the follow-up interactions to that first meeting that is the real networking skill, because it's interactions that create relationships with people. You meet someone, 2 years later, you meet them again. In the meantime, it's not like you've got a 2-year relationship. Compare that to somebody you start working with 2 years ago and you saw every day. It's professional context. It's very similar. There's you're probably friends at that stage. And that's the real distinction I want to get in. It's the long-term building of relationships with key people.
Yeah, I like that. The thing I like about real networking is it's intentional and you can sort of plan around it, which I really enjoy. Now, in the post for today, we talked about 3 things that people can do in order to help to create a real network. And I think perhaps more importantly as well, to help their teams or to help other people create a real network as well. So can we start with what the first thing that you would suggest is, Pete?
Yes, I would say the first thing you want to do is you want to be very clear on who you want in that network and why you want them. Because one of the common things I see, especially sort of in the early days of Network 101, is that people target the wrong type of people. Usually because those people happen to be particularly gregarious, friendly, and are willing to take the phone call or meet for the coffee and so on. And that is a very, very dangerous way to spend a lot of time with very little long-term benefits. So you want to be really clear on who it is that's in that network. And this talk goes back to what Mike was saying earlier. You've got a couple of different people. Obviously, you have your pipeline. You have people who you believe are decision makers, or we are talking long-term, people who you foresee are going to be decision makers in the next 1 to 2 years. Quite often, I think that's the time to get in with people before everyone else is buzzing around them like flies. There's clear territory. So you've got your pipeline of clients and existing clients. Your existing clients are a network as well. Even your former clients are part of your network as well. But you've also got and these are people who will never give you work directly. They're never going to be the one that writes the check for you, but they can help you win work. They can help you deliver work. They can help you in other ways. Classic ones are referrers, intermediaries in the professional services world, people who frequently will send work your way because of the nature of what they do as a living. You've also got referrers who
that's
are
typically then
former clients.
In your world, recruit for lawyers, that would be accountants, and for accountants that might be lawyers. There's a symbiotic relationship with that. Whereas for recruiters, say it might be HR consultants, for example, that move around helping HR departments, and they can introduce you, or it could be people that do consultancy work, or even people that sell a different kind of product into a client, like they sell a piece of software or something, but they deal with the same people that you deal with, so they're worth getting to know. They're not in your pipeline, but they're in your circle, aren't they?
Yeah, non-executive directors, if you're in the upper elements of recruitment, they're another great one. These people will be going into businesses for 1-2 years, quite a long time. when they're looking to deal with the leadership team, they ask the Ned. The Ned knows you. You've got a shoe in. So there's those people. You've also got, former candidates and former clients, people who have maybe moved industry, no longer exactly necessarily what you would place. Quite often those can be left to the wayside, but they often have contacts. They're still known. They may come back into the industry, all sorts of ways. Mike, I think that graph you showed, that was actually built mainly by networking with the candidate, wasn't it? If I recall,
mostly candidate. A lot of that new business came from candidates because of the way in which they felt about us. One of the things that you talk about a lot is get people into the friend zone. Treat people in your network 95% the same as you would your friends. And I think that's a really important point, because if you do, although underneath it all there's a professional relationship and everybody knows that, if you treat people in the same way that you treat your friends, and I know we're going to talk about this later, so I don't want to overspill into that, but if you do those things, then they get to think of you as a friend, and therefore, why wouldn't they help you? I just wanted to pull something else out at this point as well, because these are mainly not the introducers, but everybody else is outside the main circle. You've got this inner circle of people, some of which you employ, maybe a business partner or something, most of which, though, are external. And they are going to really help you shape that business. And I think it's really important to recognize they're also in your network. So to put people in there, if you're young and starting out, for example, then it could be people that you can learn from. If you're a little older, then it could be you could bounce ideas off or have someone to go and moan every now and again as to what's happening in your world. But these are all part of your network. And as Kirsty said, what did you say? It was built on purpose. Is that what you said?
Yeah, intentional. It's an intentional.
Yeah. You built this network, as its name suggests. Bring the network thing up, the real network definition again, because no, the real network definition. Thank you. Yes. So it's a group of people who are willing to help you, and they're willing to help you. And Peter's going to explain why that is in a second. But they're able to help you because you've selected them for that purpose. And that's a real difference between a professional networker who gets networking and somebody that randomly goes around kissing frogs a million miles apart.
And it's, I know a lot of the people who watch this show are the leaders of recruitment businesses. They're probably quite good at it. I suspect it's why the count was quite low for who came along. What you've got there is you've got a lot of people who are subconsciously very good at figuring out, because they've been through a lot of years of chasing poor leads and poor connections. They know what it's like. Your junior people, the people just starting out, they don't know any of that. You know far more than you realize. Sitting down with them and saying, you're looking for this. These are the people you should be connecting with, and giving them that really direct instruction. It's what we do in Network 101. We're really clear, we help clarify what they're looking for. It suddenly makes everything clear for them, and they can then act with intent. When people are unclear on what they should be trying to achieve, guess what? They don't do anything. They're frozen with confusion.
And also, I think that this, in recruitment particularly, transactionalism is your enemy. It's end of the month, the tyranny of the targets at the end of the month, because networking is a bit more of a shooting the breeze kind of activity where you are doing things, you're burning time to build relationships, which may not pay dividends for months or even years, but when it does, it'll pay big. But we build an environment where we don't really recognize that or reward it or encourage it or train people how to do it or even give people the time to do it. It's just the end of the month, get the net fee income up, hit your targets. And I understand that, by the way, don't get me wrong, but I think there has to be something, somewhere in the organization, there have to be people who are motivated and driven by building relationships, because that's the thing that will grow the business that you've got, in the same way that you saw on the graph that I showed you. It's having time to build your network intentionally.
Indeed. Okay, so I have a comment that I wanted to bring up because I think it leads nicely into the next section. So a LinkedIn user, I don't know who it is, said, while you may be tempted to network just to land a job or talk to people, that's a mistake in this person's opinion. Instead, make it your agenda to be open, personable and friendly, and to make connections between people who may be able to help each other. And I think that leads really nicely, Pete, into this second point that we discussed of the three list, which is
give before you take.
You're so grumpy then. You don't mind me saying so.
Yeah.
Before you take.
Guess what? I'm from Birmingham. This one is blindingly obvious when I say it. Right? It's like obvious. And then you ask someone, well, how can you do that? And that's the bit where people fall apart, really. Because in order to give something of meaningful value to somebody, it has to be quite close to that little inner world of theirs, full of priorities and ambitions and challenges and sense of humor, all these things, really. You've got to understand what that world is for the person you're trying to interact with. You can't just go, yes, I have this piece of content and I take it to everybody who is a HRD and they all love it equally as much. No, they don't. They've all got very unique situations. So the one I follow up with give before you take is, and this is a phrase I love, to be interesting, you must be interested. These people busy. You know, this is the common thing because, well, why would they give me the time of day, especially in that early part of the relationship? Why would they spend any time with me? Because you're going to give them something of value. You're going to bring to them something that they can use will make their life better in some way, shape, or form. It overcomes a challenge. I'll come to you saying, Mike, it overcomes a challenge. It helps them achieve some kind of ambition, or just makes them feel good. Lots of different ways you can do that, Mike.
That I just wanted to say, just reinforce that is so crucial. And I know because obviously I've done some work on Network 101 myself, and it's that, first of all, breaking the link, the transactional link. You don't just have a conversation, get something from it. Once you've made up your mind that this is a good person, this is a person that would be beneficial to you, the next question has to be, how can I add value? You know, there's that relationship bank account, and you need to be in the black in the relationship bank account with everybody in your network. In other words, you need to have given them more than they're giving you, because then they are willing to help you. That's the point. A group of people who are willing and able to help you.
In Network 101, that's the one where people immediately start hitting a stumbling block. I'd be curious to know what others are thinking, really, because it's, well, what can I give? That's the one that people hit into. Like, I'm just a junior lawyer, I'm a junior accountant, I'm a junior recruiter. What have I got that these people could possibly value? And it's because we're stuck in this, well, this is what I do for a living type mentality. And it's a huge range of things you can do. The comment you just brought up, Kirsty, said beautifully, connecting people. That's a classic one. Having a network and recognizing you two should talk, because I think it will help one or both
your
of you
network is
achieve
an asset
something
in its own right, isn't it? Because you can introduce people in it to other people in it. And the bigger that network, the bigger that asset. And I know people. There used to be a guy in London, actually. We hired him years ago when I was at Crimson. And he'd been in insurance for years. And he got a huge network. And he used to go and sit in this restaurant, Brown's, I think it was, at the same table every lunchtime. And you could basically go and sit with him and be impressed on how many people he knew. And then you could pay him to make the introductions, and that's what he would do. And we used him to break into that market. Yeah, it was very, and you'd have to buy him loads and loads of champagne or whatever he drank. But the point was, he built a very valuable asset, his network. Now, I'm not suggesting you would do that, but certainly you can leverage that network to put people in touch with people that would help. But, and this is the crucial thing, you have to know that person would really like to be introduced to that person, or that person would like this person to be introduced to them. You can't just make the assumption, because then you become a pest. You're no longer someone, a bringer of value. You're not
part of the problem.
Yeah. And it's the same with content. Sending a piece of content, how to set up an incentivization scheme in a business, and sending it to the HRD of a FTSE 100 whose entire career has been setting up those kind of schemes. You're just going to come across as a bit of a plonker.
You will. But at least you won't be seen as someone that's important. You see, your objective is to be in other people's inner circle. Now, we're saying to you, you need people in your inner circle that will make your life easier and get things happening. True. Your job is to put yourself in other people's inner circle, to be more than just a provider of a service. I mean, that's good. Don't get me wrong. That's a value to someone if they know they can use you to get their people, for sure. But if you take it to the next level, then you get in the inner circle. And that's when everything changes.
And that's what this is. That's what this does. This show, the Mike Ames Recruitment Show, you use to insidiously insert yourself into the inner circle of your target market. You give value, often by having charming, handsome guests to talk about things.
We're going to get some of those.
Do that today.
We're going to get some of those on, definitely. Next week.
I walked into that like a fool. But you are not stuck with what you know. You can find answers to problems once you know what the problem is. Start with the problem. Don't start with what you know.
Well,
That's
let me give you
the
an
recipe
example,
for poor quality content.
Just to bring this to life, right? So I remember when GDPR came out, we knew that was a problem for our market because it was a problem for everybody, but nobody really understood it. We sure as hell didn't. That's for damn sure. So we couldn't use our knowledge and experience. However, in my network was somebody who'd just become accredited as a GDPR consultant. How prescient was that? And I tapped him up and said, "Do you want to come on the show?" He did. We were inundated with people. It's one of the biggest shows that we'd had in those early years. And he came and he shared his knowledge, and people benefited from that. Well, we were the facilitators of that exchange of information, not the originators of it. Doesn't matter. We were the ones that added the value because we made it happen. You can be that person too. And that comes from your network. The bigger your network, the more you understand what people want, the more you can draw upon it to add value, and the more value you can add, which is exactly.
And I think understanding that individuals aren't one thing, they're not monoliths, they're not somebody who uses recruitment and only that. They're also going to be lots of other things. They're going to be individuals. Maybe they've got hobbies. Maybe they've got, teenage children. Maybe they've got other problems about career progression. That there's going to be these people are multiple things, and just discovering one or two of those things, one of which might be personal, one of which might be professional or whatever, is gonna aid and help you a lot with that. So fantastic.
Absolutely.
Now, Pete,
I'll hark back to that as well when we come to my top tip.
Yes, you will indeed. I just snuck in there a little bit there. So, Pete, can we move on to the third and final thing that you can do in order to build and monetize a business network?
We sure can, because it's my favorite one. Being organized beats being sociable. Okay. I think, when the dust has settled and we all look back on our career in 40 years' time, some of the best networkers are invariably the introverts, not necessarily the extroverts. It's a loose one, but essentially the people who just like people, they just go out there, just chat to everybody. The people who don't like people really have to make themselves do it. And thus they come up with systems and processes to make sure that they stay in touch with people and overcome that natural reticence. And, in Network 101, this is kind of the big thing we teach. There's a whole system you can build around this to make sure that everybody who is important enough that you have identified them and you've already invested time in creating a connection receives a regular enough series of interactions that the relationship constantly moves forwards. Because if you think about, friendships, most of us have former work colleagues or university friends who, as soon as the situation where we were forced to see each other every day disappeared, it turns out, and there were no interactions plugged in to replace it, the friendship dissipated. It drops. All relationships weaken over time unless you go back in and refresh them with new interactions, new conversations, new value, that kind of thing. So being organized means having a very clear idea about who am I prioritizing, who am I really putting my time and effort into, who do I want to make sure I never lose sight of for more than a couple of months at a time, and what do I know about them already? Those two things combined, it astounds me when I do Network 101. Quite often there are sponsors, so they're partners in these law firms and accountancy firms. And I'll ask them, hey, how do you do it? I would say 80% of the time I've asked that question, the answer has been Excel spreadsheet. I've got a spreadsheet. Yeah. Everybody who matters to me is in there. The last time I spoke to them, date-wise, what we discussed, anything I think I can use to make it easy to connect next time. Be organized. It makes your life so much easier.
I think it's interesting you say that, because a couple of things about that. First of all, I agree with that. I've been running a CRM system, a contact regime that sits on the CRM system for years. It used to be paper-based before we had CRM. It's the same system. And the magic number is 26 interactions a year, by the way. They don't have to be telephone calls or visits or anything. It's just interaction. It can be a little bubble of interaction on social media, on LinkedIn or whatever. But 26 a year is the amount that will build a relationship and keep it strong forever, right? So that's kind of a key number to bear in mind. But in practical terms, what does that really mean? Well, for the average person who's not your mate and they're not necessarily a client or they're not somebody you deal with regularly, 4 times a year really would be about right to actually ring them up and say, how the devil are you? They can do it more than that if the situation arises, but scheduled in at least 4. And then on top of that, then you've got ad hoc interactions, which are mostly social media, the odd WhatsApp, the odd text, perhaps an email, although email's not so much, but an interaction on social media. So, and then you can have 1 of those a month, maybe 2 a month, and you're pretty close to your 26. And then if you run a newsletter or something of that nature, LinkedIn newsletter, that's once a month, that's another 12. So you're going to bury your 26 on that. No problems at all. So those people that say, oh, I don't know whether I could do that. Yeah, you absolutely can. Yeah.
You absolutely can. But the other key thing you kind of talked about a little bit, those phone calls, those coffees, those dinners, those breakfasts, they add up quite quickly. And if you've got 20, 30 people in your network and you're trying to see them and it's an hour's drive to meet them for a coffee, so you can see how you actually need to have a real variety of interaction types in this. It's not just the phone, it's not just coffees, it's a mix of, as you said, social media, emails, phone calls, meetups, and that, harkening back to the very start, I love events, I love networking events. I bang on about this in Network 101 all the time. Networking events are actually brilliant if you arrange to see a lot of people you already know at them. Because they're phenomenally efficient use of time then. Efficiency is one of the things I'm obsessed with in the program, because these, accountants and lawyers have a day job, they're very busy, all of you do. And as I said, this isn't direct BD, this is a long-term time investment. So you have to be cagey about the time you're putting it into it. And that's why I'm not quite in that camp of be open to everybody. You have a limitation, you have a capacity. You do have to be a little bit ruthless of who you put in, and sometimes who you decide to kick out of that network. Because,
for example, yesterday, 2 days ago, I published a LinkedIn post, one of the best ones I've done in quite a while, 40,000 impressions on it, which is quite good. Now, okay, not everybody in there knows me, that's for sure, but I had 230 odd likes, I can't remember now, and 100 and some odd comments or whatever it is. All of those count as interactions. And it took me 20 minutes to write. So you have to think about how you're going to interact. A bubble of interaction simply means, oh, it's me again. Here I am. At its very simplest. Clearly, then, if you can add value on top of that, that's great. But you don't need to add vast amounts of value to be in the black in the relationship bank account, particularly if they're not giving you very much in return, because you're always going to be in the black then. And you have to perhaps ask yourself whether they're the right person to have in your network. But I think it's important to get organized, as Pete said it. That is I love the way you said that. I've not seen that before. Being organized beats being sociable, and it absolutely does. If you're organized and sociable, happy days. It's as good as
easy.
It gets.
Yeah. Okay, so I think unfortunately we've come to the end of our time today. So let me just do a quick summary, and then we'll talk about who we've got next week, and then we'll come to you guys for Mike and Pete for your top tips. Somebody's watching this who wants to get started on real networking, what should they do? So essentially what we've covered today is real networking is basically having a real network, which is a group of people who are willing and able to help you in your personal and professional lives. And real networking is building and maintaining that network. And you can do that by, first of all, being very clear and intentional with who you want in your network and figuring out why you want them, what sort of role they play. Because as Pete mentioned, you only have a finite amount of time. And to do that, when you've got them, you have to give before you take. You have to offer a lot of value, of actual value, not just what assumed value, actual value. Give them things that they are interested in and will help them. And then finally, you have to be organized. You have to, again, be intentional about how often and when you sort of, and how you speak to these people in your network. So before we come to Pete and Mike about who we've got about our top tip, Mike, next week, I believe in our final show, we're going to be looking at outsourcing.
We are. We're going to be looking at offshore, using offshore resources, as it says there, for beginners. Now, it could be beginners or people have tried it and it didn't really work out very well. So we've got Ketan coming on the show, and he knows there's no selling or anything like that. He's just going to come and share a wealth, an abundance of experience and knowledge around offshoring. And the reason we think it's important is that next year, potentially we might need to be able to get more results for less cost. And offshore is one way that you can do that if it's done properly. So we are going to show you how to do that next time. And I'm really looking forward to having Ketan on the show.
Yeah,
it's going to be a great show.
It's going to be a great round off for the year.
And it's the last one of the year. Yeah, fine.
It is indeed.
Christmas
Okay,
jumpers?
Pete.
Christmas jumpers?
Obviously, Christmas jumpers. We're not animals, are we? Obviously.
I'll
I've got a
tell
great
people.
Christmas jumper, so it will be perfect. So, Pete, people are watching this thinking, right, real networking sounds like something I want to get involved in, but I've got a couple of things on my plate at the minute. What's the first thing they can do or do with their team, alternatively, to get this sort of ball rolling?
First thing that I always start with in Network 101, and it's worked every single time because it does a lot of things, audit your existing network. You can download your LinkedIn, just put that into Google, how to download your LinkedIn connections. You can do that. You can go through your phone contact list. You can go through your email history. You can go lots of different places, but you need to go through and say, right, who is actually in my network right now? And have a quick guess on how strong you think that relationship is and why they're there.
Yeah. Why they're there.
You may well find that some of the strongest relationships, you're actually not that clear on what they're for. And you may well find that you don't have as many people in that network as you thought you did that you've got a good relationship with. And also, your juniors definitely won't.
You're heavily weighted towards people there that you want to become clients, which is no bad thing. I'm all in favour of having lots of people that could be clients one day. But if you want to grow as a person, you need people in your inner circle. And often we find when we do that, they're pretty light on people in the inner circle.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Pete. And Mike, your top tip, what would you say?
Okay, so you need to understand what people find interesting or useful. And the best way to do that is ask them. And we are coming up to a time now as we come to Christmas, which is great opportunity to ring people up and wish them a happy Christmas and thank them for the business that they've given you or whatever it is that you've done, and say, well, look, what are you looking forward to for next year? Because everybody likes to talk about that, plans that they've got, things that they want to do in their business. And then, well, what are your challenges? What are the things that you're a little worried about or concerned about? And they'll usually open up about that as well if you ask in that order. And then you're starting to begin to form an idea of what your target market actually finds useful. And when you do that, then you can move into the give before you take, which I think is the best thing to do.
I do as well. Just bringing this up before we end. Julia there saying, I'm in a circle. Thank you, Julia. You're in mine as well.
What about me, Julia? What about me? Oh.
And with that, I do believe it is time to end the show. So I would like to thank everybody for watching and sticking with us today. It's been fantastic. And those people who made comments as well. Mike, I would like to thank you just for being your fabulous self. And as much as it pains me, I would like to thank Peter for really adding a lot of value today. So thanks very much, Pete.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
I'll see you guys next week.
See you next week, guys.